All right, let's dive right in. We're about to walk through what's got to be one of the most intense and pivotal chapters in the entire Bible, Mark chapter 14. Mark's gospel always moves at a blistering pace, but right here it just kicks into overdrive. We're talking about the final, nail-biting 48 hours of Jesus' life on earth, leading straight to the cross.
And this chapter, wow, it's just a masterclass in dramatic contrasts. You're going to see the absolute peak of sacrificial love right up against the lowest depths of cold-hearted betrayal. We'll be in the intimate setting of the Last Supper, and then suddenly in the agonizing loneliness of a garden prayer. It's a story where God's unstoppable plan moves forward right through the middle of some of the most profound human failures you can imagine. And this clash of opposites, it starts immediately. The chapter opens with two totally different preparations being made for Jesus' death. One is a sinister plot by his enemies, and the other, well, it's a beautiful act of worship from a follower. I mean, just look at this. It's night and day. Over in Bethany, a woman, and we learn from John's gospel that this is Mary, she does something absolutely extravagant. She takes this incredibly expensive perfume, pure spikenard, worth a whole year's salary, and she breaks the jar and anoints Jesus with it. At the very same time, Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' own 12 disciples, is off cutting a deal with the chief priests to sell him out for 30 pieces of silver, the going price for a common slave. It's just staggering. One sees Jesus as priceless, the other puts a bargain bin price tag on him. So when some of the disciples start grumbling about what a waste this is, Jesus immediately steps in to defend her. And he doesn't just praise her heart, he gives her action this deep, prophetic meaning. In Mark chapter 14, verse 8, he says she's actually anointed his body for his burial. She was getting him ready for the cross, whether she fully realized it or not. And then he makes this incredible promise. Her story, what she did right there, will be told forever, wherever the good news is shared.
Okay, so let's move to the next scene. We're shifting from that public display to a very private, intimate moment. The disciples are gathering for the Passover meal, but Jesus is about to take this ancient tradition and give it a whole new meaning that will change everything. Can you just picture it? They're all there in the middle of this sacred meal, and Jesus just drops a bombshell. The betrayal isn't coming from some outside enemy. Nope, it's coming from right here, inside this tiny circle of his closest friends. The disciples are just floored, absolutely crushed, and they all start asking, "Is it me? Is it me?" The whole mood of the room is just shattered. And in the middle of all this tension, Jesus establishes what we now call the Lord's Supper, or communion. He takes the bread, he breaks it, and he says, "This is my body, which is about to be broken for you." Then he takes the cup of wine and he explains that it represents his blood, the blood of a new testament or a new covenant, which will be poured out to bring forgiveness. He's totally redefining the Passover. It's no longer just about looking back to being saved from slavery in Egypt. It's now about looking forward to being saved from sin. And that phrase, new covenant, is so important. This is a game changer. The old way of relating to God, through the law and animal sacrifices, is about to be fulfilled and replaced. Just as the prophet Jeremiah predicted hundreds of years earlier, this new relationship won't be based on the blood of goats and bulls, but on the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus himself. His death would open up a new and direct way to God for anyone and everyone who believes. From that upper room, the scene shifts again. They travel to the Mount of Olives, to a garden called Gethsemane. And it's here, in the quiet of the night, that we get one of the most raw and honest glimpses into Jesus' heart, where his complete humanity and his perfect divine submission are both on full display. On the way there, Jesus tells them flat out, "You're all gonna scatter. You're all going to abandon me tonight." And Peter, always so passionate and impulsive, he just won't have it. He says, "Even if every single other person bails on you, not me, I will never deny you. I'm ready to die with you." And that bold, confident promise, well, it's about to be put to the test. Once they get to the garden, Jesus is just overcome with this deep, soul-crushing agony. He's not just afraid of the physical pain of crucifixion, he's shrinking from the spiritual horror of taking on the sin of the entire world, what he calls this cup. His prayer is so incredibly human. "Abba, Father, please take this cup away from me." But it always ends in perfect submission. Nevertheless, not what I want, but what you want. And what makes this scene even more heartbreaking is the failure of his friends. He asks his inner circle, Peter, James, and John, for one thing:
Just stay awake and pray with me, just for an hour. But 3 different times he comes back from pouring his heart out to the Father, and 3 times he finds them sound asleep. His words to them are a warning for all of us, really. The spirit is truly ready, but the flesh is weak. And he's barely finished praying when suddenly the peace of the garden is shattered by torches and the sound of an armed mob. The moment is here. The quiet prayer vigil explodes into betrayal, arrest, and the start of a complete sham of a trial. Judas uses a kiss, a sign of affection and friendship, as the signal to the guards. It's the ultimate act of treachery. And in the chaos that follows, all those bold promises the disciples made just a few hours ago, they vanish into thin air. Just like Jesus said they would. Mark chapter 14, verse 50 tells us, they all forsook him and fled. Jesus is left utterly alone. Jesus is then dragged before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court, for a totally illegal trial in the middle of the night. They try to find false witnesses, but their stories are a mess and don't even line up. Through it all, Jesus stays silent. Finally, the high priest has had enough, and he puts Jesus under oath and asks him the question that everything hinges on. Are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus breaks his silence with the clearest, most direct, and most powerful confession in the Gospels. Just 2 simple words, I am. And then he doubles down, quoting from the book of Daniel, claiming that he is the divine Son of Man who will one day sit at God's right hand and return to judge the world. With that one answer, he sealed his own fate. Well, that was all the high priest needed. He tears his robes in this big theatrical show of outrage and declares Jesus guilty of blasphemy. The verdict is instant and unanimous, death. And what follows is just horrific. The very religious leaders of the nation spit on him, they blindfold him, they beat him with their fists, and they mock him. But while this mockery of a trial is happening inside, another kind of trial is playing out in the courtyard below. Peter, the one who swore he'd die for Jesus, is now facing his own test, and he's about to fail in the most spectacular way possible. It unfolds exactly as Jesus predicted, step by agonizing step. First, a servant girl points him out, and Peter says, I don't know what you're talking about. And Mark's gospel is unique here. It notes that the rooster crows once. Then he's accused a second time, and he denies it again. Finally, a whole group of people recognize his Galilean accent. He's cornered, and Peter just panics. He starts cursing and swearing, insisting he doesn't know the man. And at that very moment, for the second time, the rooster crows. And that sound, it just cuts right through Peter's heart. He remembers Jesus' words, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times, and the full weight of his boastful pride and his cowardly failure just comes crashing down on him. The chapter ends with this devastating image of a broken man who runs out and just weeps his heart out. So, as we wrap this up, this is the question Mark 14 really forces us to ask ourselves. In our own weakness, in our own moments of failure, and we all have them, where do we fit in this story? Do we see ourselves in the sleeping disciples, in the overconfident Peter, or maybe in the woman who gave everything she had out of pure love? This chapter shows us that even in the midst of our worst moments, God's perfect plan to save us moves forward, absolutely unstoppable. And like we always say, let's not just be hearers of the word. To really let this sink in, go and use the flashcards that go along with this lesson, and then take the quiz to see what you've learned. And your homework is to get ready for what comes next by reading Mark chapter 15. This has been an explainer by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.